Fighting games are exactly that. Games. A product that's developed by an often large team of people over a span of several years, and with that comes problems. From Ultra Street Fighter 4 having numerous technical issues on PS4 at launch, to Street Fighter 5 being pretty much empty when it came out in 2016, not just fighting games, but games in general can and will suffer from troubles in development. However, more often than not, the development team crosses the finish line and puts out their game, hopefully to critical acclaim. But what about when the rug gets pulled out from underneath them? What happens to their hard work, especially when the game has already been announced to the public? Now that I've got you thinking about this, I want to talk about some cancelled fighting games that I think could have been very interesting had they been finished and released. This video will not be a comprehensive look at every single cancelled fighting game, but rather a reflection on some of the more interesting ones from the past 2 or so decades. Now that that's out of the way, let's begin the video properly with the classic that I'm sure we've all been aware of for a long, long time. Tekken Cross Street Fighter. I know this is Street Fighter Cross Tekken, not Tekken Cross Street Fighter, but just put up with it, alright? Announced on the 24th of July 2010 at the San Diego Comic-Con by Tekken series director Katsuhiro Harada, alongside its brother Street Fighter Cross Tekken, Tekken Cross Street Fighter has been missing in action for the past 12 years. While Street Fighter Cross Tekken was eventually released in 2012 for the Xbox 360, PS3, PC, and PS Vita to critical acclaim with some amazing DLC practices, the Tekken version unfortunately never saw the light of day. However, we do know some information about how the game would have played. Street Fighter Cross Tekken is a 2D fighting game that plays like Street Fighter with 6 attack buttons, but this game would have played like Tekken with 4 attack buttons. Tekken Cross Street Fighter was still in very, very early development when it was announced, and all that was shown publicly was this promotional image confirming Ryu, Evil Ryu, Jin, and Devil Jin as characters. Harada also showed off a prototype character model for Ryu in Paul's gi from Tekken, but he stressed that it wasn't final, and that things like character modeling and lighting weren't finished yet. Later, on March 4th, 2012, Namco released a poll on Facebook asking people to vote for who they would like to see be playable in the game. There were 55 Tekken characters and 66 Street Fighter characters to choose from. Harada went on to state that the poll would not 100% reflect the final game's character roster, but would rather serve as a reference point for the developers to use when making the game. A month later in April, Harada said that the game was 10% complete. Okay, that's good, they're making progress, can't wait to see more. So, 2013 goes by, and there's really nothing, there's no news whatsoever. But that's okay, because in 2014 we finally got something. Harada said that the game was still in active development, it's just that Namco was waiting for the perfect time to market it properly. A year later, in 2015, Harada keeps the hype train going by explaining that development of the game is far along, and in December of that year, Akuma from Street Fighter is announced as a playable character for Tekken 7. That's awesome, I can't wait for more! However, in 2016, Harada makes the announcement that the game was now on hold, with the reasoning being that Namco Bandai didn't want the game to split the Street Fighter and Tekken communities. 2017 goes by and there's no news, but in 2018, at the end of the year in a livestream, Harada says that the game is now 30% complete. Okay, I mean, it's only been, I don't know, 8 years since you announced the game, but that's fine. I guess you can just keep being patient. Later, in May 2019, Harada states that while he personally wants to release the game and get it out there, his logical and business sense is making him have doubts about it. At the end of that year, he puts out this poll on his Twitter, asking if people still want the game to be released. Finally, in June 2021 on his Harada's Bar livestream series, he explains that no one has a clue anymore about the game's development. Not that it's been officially cancelled, just that no one knows what it's up to. Although with that being said, Harada also revealed that some of the animations that the Namco team made for the game went over to Akuma in Tekken 7. Well, that was weird. I personally think they announced Tekken Cross Street Fighter way too early. I understand that they wanted to break the FGC's hype limits by announcing not 1, but 2 crossover titles at the same time, but they should have left the game in the oven for longer before taking it out and leaving it to rest. I think Tekken Cross Street Fighter could have been something really cool, and part of me wants to eventually play it one day. I'm a big fan of the game that did get released, so the reverse of that is a game that sounds crazy. even though I suspect that most, if not all Street Fighter characters in the game would have had Tekken 7 Akuma damage.
Punish there, nice whip punish from the... Wow, look at this damage.
Oh my god, I just looked up at the bar.
And look at the wall here. This is going to do a ton of damage. Is that going to be enough to kill?
Oh my god! The whole energy bar depleted.
While we're on the topic of Capcom and Street Fighter, let's go over their own cancelled 3D fighting game, Capcom Fighting AllStars Card Holder. You've most likely heard of or even seen this game if you're a die-hard Capcom fan like I am, but in case you haven't, I'll explain. In the early 2000s, Capcom was planning a crossover 3D fighting game for the arcades and PS2. Not a crossover with another company like the previous game, but an internal crossover with characters from games like Street Fighter, Final Fight, Darkstalkers, Rival Schools, and Strider, all trading blows, as well as featuring brand new original characters. But how did this all come about? Look, it's a long story, so I'm gonna simplify it. Around the year 2000, SNK suffered major financial losses, and ended up becoming a subsidiary of a pachinko company in Japan called... Aruze? Aruze? I never heard of this company, so I'm just gonna call them Aruze. So anyway, shortly after, Aruze leaves the game development scene. So game director from SNK, Toyohisa Tanabe, and a few other staff members working at SNK at the time, were able to use their game industry connections to leave SNK and jump ship over to Capcom to work there. Around 20 ex-SNK employees were now working for Capcom, and as they were a brand new and inexperienced team, they felt that they needed to prove themselves to their superiors by making something really special and unique. Their goal was to develop Capcom Fighting AllStars Card Holder. While the game was certainly ambitious, contained fan-favorite characters and had a gritty storyline, the development team's inexperience essentially killed the game dead in its tracks. The game had a location test in Japanese arcades in 2003, and no one liked it. The reaction from fans was overwhelmingly negative, and fighting game OG James Chen stated, "I remember when Capcom Fighting AllStars first started showing up with footage from game magazines and Japanese game sites. People just looked at it and were like, this looks kinda bad, you know, and so when it was cancelled, I still kind of remember people just being like, yeah, it's probably for the better." Thankfully, artwork and footage of the game in motion did survive. Characters like Ryu, Chun-Li, Hagar, Alex, Poison, Strider, Charlie, Akuma, Akira, Dimitri, and a certain guest character all received brand new character portraits, indicating that the artwork team made quite a bit of brand new artwork for the game, only for it to essentially be wasted, which is a bit of a shame. Going back to the special someone for a moment, it's widely speculated by fans that this is either Kyo or K-Dash from the King of Fighters. As former SNK staff were developing this game, it makes sense that an SNK character would also show up, but it's unknown how they would have fit into the game's storyline. Speaking of the storyline, let's get into it. Taking place in Metro City from Final Fight, a mysterious figure named Death has hidden a bomb called Laughter Sun somewhere in the city, and when Mayor Mike Hagar finds out about this, he contacts the other characters in the game to try and find the bomb to prevent it from exploding. However, 3 code holders need to be defeated in order to do so: Dee, Rock, and Ingrid, who you may recognize. The most interesting part about this, in my view, is that according to Tanabe in an interview on Capcom's Japan website that I've had to translate, the game had a time limit. It had multiple endings. I would have loved to see something like this from a Capcom fighting game story, so I'm pretty bummed out that this game was cancelled. Combining a fighting game with a time limit system which sounds like it was ripped straight out of Dead Rising sounds really cool. There's simply too much information on the game to go over for this one video, so if you want to learn more about Capcom Fighting AllStars, I highly recommend googling it and reading about it as much as you can, because it's pretty interesting. Now let's move on to something unrelated to Capcom, SNK, or Namco as a sort of palate cleanser. Something a little bit more obscure and... sci-fi. Sega's unreleased fighting game SciFi was, believe it or not, helmed by Sega legend Yu Suzuki of all people. SciFi was being developed by a new internal team at Sega called Digital Rex, and the game was meant to be the first ever arcade fighting game to incorporate touchscreen controls. Set in the future, SciFi wasn't a regular one-on-one fighting game where you could walk, dash, jump, block, etc. But it was meant to be something like Dragon Ball Z, where you would fly around the opponent and blast them with energy bolts as a means of attack. Developed for Sega's Lindbergh arcade hardware, which powered games like Virtua Fighter 5 and the House of the Dead 4, SciFi would have been presented on a 29-inch touchscreen, and luckily, footage of the game still does live on through the internet. I'll have a link to this in the description if I don't forget, but GameSpot still hosts their 2005 Japan Amusement Machine Show overview video on their website, and luckily, this video contains real gameplay footage of SciFi. Here's a quote I found from GameSpot's SciFi hands-on article from September the 1st, 2005. Though it may seem like an odd choice for a fighter, SciFi's combat works surprisingly well with the touchscreen. You'll move your character with directional buttons in the four corners of the screen that'll let you move toward or away from your foe by slipping into the four quadrants that make up the battlefield. You'll attack by simply tapping your foe on the screen. If you keep your finger over them, you'll lock on and fire off a slow-moving but powerful shot that will home in on them. You'll also be able to fire blind shots into the four quadrants to try and wing your enemy as they maneuver around you. And I'm being honest here, but I can't think of any other arcade game from that time that has used touchscreen controls to control fights, and SciFi has my respect for trying something new. However, the only somewhat negative the press took away from the game was the visuals. GameSpot explained that the visuals weren't bad by any means, but they won't blow anyone away yet, and the character models sport a high number of polygons and animate quite nicely. Overall, I would have loved to try out SciFi as it seems pretty wild. I think that Sega was willing to take more risks back in the early 2000s, especially in the arcades with their wacky games that made absolutely no sense, yet were stupid fun to play. But what if you want something grittier and darker and edgier? Then look no further, because I've got you covered. You may think I'm lying, but you're just gonna have to believe me when I say that Mortal Kombat 8 was actually cancelled. Or, well, look. It's a bit hard to explain, so just bear with me. Mortal Kombat Armageddon is the 7th game, and everyone refers to the 2011 game as Mortal Kombat 9, right? So where's Mortal Kombat 8? If you didn't know, the often forgotten Mortal Kombat vs DC universe is considered canonically to be the 8th main entry into the Mortal Kombat series. Yeah, I know it's weird, but let's just move on and forget about it because I don't want to have to look at this anymore. In 2007 at Midway's Gamer Day, that name makes me want to vomit, series co-creator Ed Boon was hyping up the next generation of Mortal Kombat, saying that it was going to be very dark, serious, and gritty, free of vibrant, saturated colours, while having a realistic art style heavily inspired by Gears of War. So how the hell did we get this? I'm not sure with 100% certainty, but I don't think that Mortal Kombat 8 ever entered active development. But there does exist concept art of Kano, Raiden, Scorpion, and Sonya Blade, who wants nothing more than to age restrict my humble YouTube channel.
You gonna make me act up.
Ed Boon stated that Mortal Kombat 8 would have been a back-to-basics reboot of the series, and this doesn't surprise me considering that I'm pretty sure Mortal Kombat 9 is a reboot, but the series timeline is more convoluted than Metal Gear Solid's at this point, so honestly I have no clue. There isn't much information on this game overall, so while I'd love to show some gameplay or some prototype test footage, it simply doesn't exist for the public to see, and I'm not sure if it even existed for the development team to test out back in the day. We did get this game as a result. And look, I'll let it slide just because it has Batman in it. This is a bit too realistic for me, so I want to go back to something a bit more colourful and anime. We all know about Dead or Alive, and no, for once I will not be making a boob joke in this video because it would be too obvious, so it's not going to happen, I'm sorry. Anyway, I've given you a couple of seconds to look at this picture and study it closely. But did you notice anything weird about it? While most of this Dead or Alive 4 advertisement is normal, you have to look here to see what I'm talking about. Let's see what games they show off. Okay, Dead or Alive 4, that's normal. Dead or Alive Extreme 2, not normal, and would probably get me on a watch list, but okay, fine. Wait, what are these two? Dead or Alive Code Chronos and Project Progressive? These games were never revealed. Just like the series boobs! According to series creator and Tekken fanboy, Tomonobu Itagaki, Dead or Alive Code Chronos would have been a prequel to the first Dead or Alive game, and it would have focused on Ayane and Kasumi, with a young Ayane on the placeholder box art as evidence. That's all we know about the game itself, as it was quickly cancelled, supposedly due to the beef between Itagaki and Tecmo in the 2000s. In 2010, current Team Ninja head Yosuke Hayashi stated that the game never really took off and that it, quote, never got past the framework level. Itagaki disputes this claim and wrote in a response to a fan on Facebook in 2014, I find it strange that some people said DOA Code Chronos was never in production. If that's true, I guess that means that I'm free to say whatever I want about it. Let me fill you in on the truth. DOA CC was a roguelike in production. If someone wants to try to reverse that reality, they'll first have to own up to their own lies. I'm not sure if he means roguelike as in like a procedurally generated dungeon crawler or something else, but I'm pretty sure it's the latter. The Unseen 64 page for the game states that it was intended to take the fighting game series in a new direction, transitioning it into a full action adventure similar to Ninja Gaiden, but I couldn't find another source to verify this, so you're gonna have to take it with a grain of salt. All that exists of Code Kronos today is this little cover art on the DOA 4 advertisement, the game's logo, and this ominous looking box art, contained within a secure glass cabinet so it doesn't break free and blow up the earth. Moving on to Project Progressive, it's safe to assume that this would have been a Dead or Alive game, right? I mean, it was featured in a Dead or Alive advertisement, and the girl figure on the cover kind of looks like Alpha 152 to me. However, this is a common misconception, if you can even say such a thing about a game that was never even officially, publicly announced. Official concept art has been leaked though. I don't know about you, but this really does not look like Dead or Alive to me. The characters remind me of Oni Chambara or the Rin sisters in Anarchy Reigns with their traditional Asian-inspired outfits and colours. These pieces of artwork lead me to believe that this would have been an action or a role-playing game rather than a fighting game, and it would have been really awesome to see this game come to life back in the day for the good old Xbox 360. Hayashi also stated that Project Progressive made it to a plot version, although the game had stopped being worked on after the Dead or Alive series' 10th anniversary, which was in 2007. I made this video to remember some cancelled fighting games that unfortunately never saw the light of day. There were so many games that I couldn't cover in this video, because if I did, we'd be here all week. From the gritty streets of Capcom's Metro City, to out of the Earth's atmosphere with what Sega was cooking up with SciFi, I reckon at least one of the games I talked about in this video could have been really, really big had it not been cancelled. Thanks for watching, I hope you learned something and had fun, and I'll see you in the next one.